Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current and brought to you by Lipscomb & Pitts Insurance and DataFax. This show shares personal stories and insight from those who are giving back and making a difference so we can learn and do the same. We cover life lessons, business advice, passion, and purpose. Now here's our host, the CEO of City Current, Jeremy Park.
Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current and brought to you by Lipscomb & Pitts Insurance and DataFax. We have a legendary ChangeMakers podcast for you on this round. We have Bill Morris, who actually, his autobiography is on sale now. His book just came out. It's Bill Morris, A Legendary Life. It documents Bill Morris's life of public service as the sheriff of Shelby County, Tennessee, most known for taking James Earl Ray into custody. Also, too, the book documents his 4 consecutive terms as mayor of Shelby County, his friendship with Elvis Presley, his devotion to promoting the Memphis area globally, and his devotion to his family. So we have the legendary Bill Morris, and if you live here in Shelby County or Memphis area, you know the name Bill Morris. You probably drive on him. He is a famous man. So Bill Morris, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm very careful when I ride on the Bill Morris Parkway because I think it's an Autobahn, a racetrack. So at my age, I have to be very careful about what's around me. But thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. You are, like I said, a legacy in this area for sure. Let's start because the book just came out. We want to definitely dive into that and some of the stories from the book. But talk a little about, you had a difficult childhood, but that really kind of paved the way for you, your vision. It really created kind of an opportunity for you from a confidence standpoint, but also too from a trajectory. Give us a little bit of that kind of backstory, if you will, of growing up.
Well, I'm quick to point out that I was not unique in being born into a poverty environment during the Depression in the early 30s. A big percentage of the rural South particularly, there was no economic opportunity, basically. It was non-existent. It was a time when the Depression, small towns particularly, that had survived on a little bit of farming, maybe a little bit of dairy and sawmills and what have you. During those times, there was no money and no jobs and certainly no welfare system. And so those who were uneducated, like my family was, they grade school only, sharecropping, farming, whatever, they had children, but they couldn't do an awful lot for their children. But we were not unique in that a lot of people in small town Mississippi, particularly where I grew up, they had the same situation. My family ultimately, and when the war came along, decided to move out of the city to Mobile, Alabama, where there was work going on, building ships, getting ready for the war, and so forth. And so they got a glimpse of how it can be better by moving to where the economy is, as opposed to staying and trying to weather a storm that was not going to go away anytime soon. And so anyway, with that happening, and we won't go into all the details from Mobile and back and so forth, but when I was about 14, my family had moved back to Mississippi. And by that time, I was pretty well determined that, the future had to depend on me. Able to finish high school and junior college on my own there.
Yeah.
And then I took the Greyhound bus and came west to Memphis, Tennessee to go to school and get a job, and the rest is history.
Talk about when the idea of public service from Shelby County Sheriff and just kind of stepping into that line, when did that get into your mind of, hey, I want to do something big, but around giving back and pouring into my community with a public service, a leadership role in a public service?
I have to tell you, I never had a vision toward doing something big. I just had a vision of doing something, and I worked for a company that encouraged me to join a very active organization called the Junior Chamber of Commerce, the JCs. At that time, in 1958, in November, December of 1958, we had about 700 young men, 21 to 35, who joined an organization whose entire purpose was allowing you to be involved in initiatives where you could learn without being concerned whether you won or didn't win, It was doing public service. We were interested in projects having to do with bicycle safety and mental health issues and what have you. Large projects, numbers of projects. And it was a political, energizing mindset that we created. And because John Kennedy, who I might add, was very much in the minds of people about that time when he says, it is your responsibility. Get engaged, be active, make the changes necessary, go out and be involved. Because everyone has the opportunity and responsibility to take a part of the responsibility of where they live, their society. And with that, we became engaged. Our creed in the JCs really suited me fine. It said, we believe that faith in God gives meaning and purpose to human life, and that the brotherhood of man transcends the sovereignty of nations, and that economic justice can best be won by free men through free enterprise, and mainly that government should be of laws and not of the people. Those are the lines of a creed that those 700 and 800 members from year to year really believed in. We spoke to that and how we felt politically, and that's how we looked at people who ran for office. Are they represented by what we believe in? So anyway, Jack Morris, who well known in this city, but Jack and I were good friends, and I was president of that organization in 1961, and we decided to go down and visit the sheriff at that time. We had no interest in politics, particularly at that time, but we wanted to be engaged in what politicians were doing. We really thought everybody should step in and help the sheriff with the problems he had with traffic safety and drunken driving and all of that, and we were into that at that point. So we go down and we visit. And the sheriff was an old line law enforcement guy. Matter of fact, grew up through the Memphis Police Department, then became engaged in politics, ran for sheriff, and was elected. And so we go down to visit. We explained what we wanted to do, we wanted to help. And we were basically just sort of patted on the head and said, thank you, boys, for coming by, but we've got this thing under control. And I said, as long as they make cars and make whiskey, said they're going to kill themselves. So, yeah, there you go. And so we left feeling a little put out. He did give us a special deputy badge, I was probably 28 at that point, and Jack was 29. And, young guys, active, just full of energy. So we left, and for the next year or so, it sort of fretted about the way we were sort of just put down. So in an afternoon after work one day, we decided, well, why don't we just take a public stand on this issue of the corruption in the sheriff's department. What was going on was not desirable. It's all in the news, and special interest, people hired because of some friend asked them. It was not a professional department. And so we had a reporter by the name of Paul Vanderwood, worked for the press center, and he was also a JC. And in that conversation, we began to look at all the things that we could identify as being negative for the community. And so here again, John Kennedy said, if you see a negative that you think should be changed, change it. Speak out. So I was sort of selected by drawing a short straws, and really because Jack Marsh should have been the candidate because he had been a legislator, and I had such an inferiority complex. I was afraid to stand up and speak, and it was just. I was traumatized.
So they chose you.
Huh?
I said, so they chose you.
So they chose me. And I said, oh my God, I'll do this. My wife almost had a heart attack when I told her I was going to run for sheriff. She said, you can't spell sheriff. So, laughingly. And the company I worked for previously, Tufin Company, had asked me to come back to that company. I had left for a couple of years and become a vice president of a large printing company because that was my business. I was a German printer from Mississippi and so forth. And I liked it. It was a good profession. And I told them that I would, but I had agreed on running for sheriff long enough for us to get our message out about what we thought should be done and changing the direction of law enforcement. And they agreed that I could come to work. That was in 1964. I could come to work August the 5th, one day after the election. lo and behold, we went on a campaign, and the local Chief Director of Fire and Police, Claude Armour, who had been a hand-picked appointee, so to speak, from Mr. Crump, E.H. Crump, the D-Boss Crump back then. And he said he thought I was right by speaking out, and even among his peers. So he decided to support me.
Wow.
He was a powerful man. He was recognized by J. Edgar Hoover as being one of the top people in the country that was able to talk to the community and was respected. And with that and a few other incidents that took place, the momentum really picked up. I was the first person. I was 31 years of age, and I had no law enforcement experience, but I did have several points. One was that as a business person, the sheriff's department should be operated like a business. Secondly, they needed to elect someone who would not have debts to the people presently working in the sheriff's department, so you could make free decisions without any fear of any problem from it. And so people began to like that dialogue. And then I began to pinpoint the issues of the misuse of squad cars and the special privileges for friends who were in jail, such as having food brought in from restaurants and so forth. And after a while, the press assembly picked up on this, and headlines started popping all over the place. And we ran into a lot of trouble with the people who were present in the department. And the more they thought about what we said, they took exception to that and tore up the signs and that type of thing. But on election day, I won handily and did not expect to win. And I was at the point, not only was I elected sheriff and never been there, the Civil Rights Act had been passed that year, and the first duty that I was to perform was to introduce civil rights to the sheriff's department. They had like deputies who could not arrest white people, and it ran colored water, toilet facilities, and all. It goes with a segregated society. And so I had that on the table day one.
And you walk in with no experience, and you have to prove, you have to learn, and you have a whole new
Totally. Wow. But it was the spirit of the thing. You know, I was ready to go. These young people, this was basically a JC project. It wasn't a Bill Marsh project.
Right.
I was just having to be an agent of
well, and I think that's an
change.
important piece of this is you have a support network in place,
Right.
and to your point, you have the desire and the will and the hunger to want to make things better, and so that's going to push you to make sure that you can do the job right.
And a part of my first term, it's a 2-year term, Jeremy, my thought was we have to get the public involved. We have to open the sheriff's department so in the light of the day, so to speak, so they can see what's going on. So I began programs of starting Boy Scout Explorer posts in the sheriff's department. David is working with them. I started a reserve program, which is still in existence, of people wearing a uniform and being trained and serving for free. And then I invited the ministers and the business leaders to come in and ride squad cars on the weekends to see how we were doing. ACLU, always a conflict before with whether or not law enforcement was trying to hide what they were doing. I invited them in. As a matter of fact, the first murder case that we had, I had asked them to come in and stay with us from can to can till that thing was over with. Found the body, how it was handled, how the arrest was made, how the trial went, how the incarceration went, all of that. And by the end of the first year, we had so many people who had volunteered, so many organizations involved in the sheriff's department. We went by the platform 80% prevention and 20% enforcement. And we had a lot to do. We had the first term, by the end of the first term, 2-year term, we had reduced the juvenile court crime rate to 15%, which was the lowest ever recorded before or since, basically. But at the end of the first year, I said we had a report card we needed to address. And Dr. Paul Collar, who was a minister of First Baptist Church, reminded me, if you better do what we tell you to do, or you told me you were going to do, we'll be just as bad taking you out as we were putting you in. And so we had a public hearing, so to speak, at Clearpool. 700 people show up. And I get at it, man. I give a report. Here's what we said we'd do, and this is what we did, and this is what we've done. And the next time it came around for election, for the first time ever in the history, I had no opponent. And it told me that people want transparency. And then in the process of the civil rights, I've always been proud of the fact I came from the small town where poor people were all one people, black, white, whatever. So we were all one people.
Going back full circle, the fact that, to your point, being poor knows no color.
Right.
It knows no color of skin. And so being able to understand the plight, the burden, the difficulties, the challenges firsthand, but also, too, to your point, not seeing skin color, just seeing hope and opportunities, and the fact that we can all work together creates the environment where people want to come together and work together and help our city.
That is unquestionably correct. And I found that evidence more and more and more as I went through the stages of political life. And then when I lost an election for the city mayor, and looking at how the evaluation took place, Memphis was either liberal or conservative. I was in the middle of the road. I was a moderate. And guys like Mike Cody and Jeff Sanford, we were all moderates. So some good people were left on the side of the road politically because they could not get elected unless they changed their value in terms of perspective. In those days, Jeremy, we didn't have a lot of television and a lot of media coverage. It was like you had the newspapers, and you had backyard coke parties, and you had shaking hands at factories that when shift changes, you came face to face with people.
Yeah, all
and
face to face relationships.
If you look a person square in the eye and you say, "This is what I believe in, Mr. Park," I would really appreciate you give me a shot, because I think this can be better, because I'm going to be there, and this is how I feel, and this is my philosophy. Will you help me? And having said that, it worked out fine, and I loved it. I was going to bowling alleys at 12 o'clock at night. People thought I was crazy, but that I didn't have money for television, and if you had television, I just had to go see people. We had no money to run. When I left Memphis State, I didn't know 50 people in Memphis. Went to the Army, came back.
Thank you for listening to our ChangeMakers podcast. City Current is a catalyst of over 100 partners joining forces and funds to power the good through free events, positive media, and philanthropy. If you like our efforts and you're looking to power the good with us, follow us on social media at City Current and check out our website at citycurrent.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen. And if you know a changemaker, please reach out and let us know so we can consider them for a future show. The ChangeMakers podcast is brought to you by DataFacts. DataFacts is a national provider of trusted background screening products such as criminal searches, drug screening, employment and education verifications, and post-hire monitoring to employers of all sizes. DataFacts is one of the few background screeners that holds the stringent National Association of Professional Background Screeners accreditation. They're certified by the WBENC as a 100% woman-owned business, and in 2018, they were ranked by HRO Today's Baker's Dozen customer satisfaction ratings as one of the top background screeners in the nation. You are in good hands with DataFacts. Visit datafacts.com to learn more, and make sure to mention the ChangeMakers podcast. And now, back to the show. Well, let's bounce, because I want to cover some historical pieces, I think, just because you've been such a huge part of the history of Memphis. Talk about Martin Luther King Jr., the assassination. You play a very, very important role in that. I'll kind of leave that there. I'll let you kind of share the story, but share your side of the story.
Well, you probably have read or at least know about the fact that we had, when the Civil Rights Act passed, in New York and different places, public works employees began to have their representatives evaluate opportunities of changing circumstances, working conditions, salaries, benefits, and all of that. Mayors and others did not respond to the individual plight of certain communities. Unlike the sheriff's department where I was, I began to integrate all of our activities in the black community. But the labor situation got worse and worse and worse. And the labor strike, police departments went on strike, the sanitation department, then went on strike. And all this built up to having all of the problems we had. And I point this out. whenever I have the opportunity. Memphis was fortunate in that, in one sense, when Martin Luther King was killed, Memphis was already prepared for all the chaos that was going on. And the state, the Highway Patrol, the National Guard, Memphis Police Department, all of the agencies were consolidated with it, and we created a strategy on how to deal with the problems. And we didn't know that Martin Luther King was going to get killed, but we did know there were going to be protests, there could be violence, and we've seen that in cities all over the country, Chicago and Los Angeles and New York, and this is breaking out all over. And if you knew anything about human nature, you know this is going to hit southern cities as well. With that in mind, when Martin Luther King was killed, we were prepared. Claude Armour, I mentioned earlier to you, he was now working for the governor, and we had developed a strategy that we were prepared for whatever. And we had units, enforcement people, and they ran in three-part units, 3 vehicles, trucks, open trucks. And all the agencies were involved. And it affected what James Earl Ray did. When James Earl Ray shot Martin Luther King out the window from Main Street, he came running down, but it was the coffee break time for one of these units. And there's a fire station next door. They all went there, which is direct across from the Rain Motel, to have coffee. Well, James Earl Ray bounces out with his suitcase and his rifle, and he's going to get in his Ford, and he was going to cut out of town. Well, here was 150, 60 policemen, all of a sudden screaming. He thought they were looking for him. They didn't know exactly that this was what was happening. I show up a few minutes later, and the gun and the suitcase was there, and I'm hearing all this stuff about the car, the white car and what have you. But he was frightened by that. He thought he was just going to be inundated with 40, 50 policemen. On it an hour earlier, it would have been nothing going on. And he could have taken the gun and his suitcase, and he would not have left all those clues. But anyway, the violence, we got it under control like in just a few hours, because we had a curfew and we had all these agencies in place, and we had the cooperation. As a matter of fact, I brought in 75 Arkansas Highway patrolmen, big guys, met them on the bridge and swore them in as law enforcement officers. And we did the same thing with one representative on every fire truck, so they could carry a rifle and protect themselves when they were trying to go around the city trying to put out fires. And I was active in the community, so was Claude Armour and Frank Holloman and J.C. McDonald, all the people in law enforcement. And it was on the scene, seeing and participating, and I think the city felt comfortable because the flame went out pretty quickly in terms of violence. As soon as Martin Luther King was killed, though, cities all over America went chaotic. I mean, it went like crazy, and a lot of violence, stores destroyed, and all of that. And we had some of that, but nothing compared to what's in some of these other places, major cities, because I felt like we were prepared.
Talk about on your end, maybe a proud moment or something, when you look at that and how that was handled, but ultimately your time, your tenure with Shelby County Sheriff's Office. Give us kind of one thing that puts a smile on your face with your tenure there.
I have to tell you, the fact that me personally, I was selected as Lawman, National Lawman of the Year, But what was really important was the department was recognized as one of the top 10 departments in the country, and that was celebrated by the Kiwanis Club nationally and so forth. And so it spoke well of the teamwork, and that was spelled out in all the awards and recognitions that we had professionalized the department. And I think that the men and women at the department had a great sense of pride they had gotten the salaries up, and they had good uniforms. They looked nice. The physical well-being. We had programs. We don't need people who don't look like they're capable of doing the job. And so a weight loss program started immediately after I went into the office, getting people to respond. And they said, well, their uniforms, they didn't get any uniform allowance, maybe one uniform a year. And so we changed all of that. But the main thing we did, we hired more people that wanted to be professional, and we raised the salaries, men and women, equal pay for equal job, and that was unheard of as well. And then at the end of the day, and I think you can read on Facebook or anywhere else, the people that were there, they applaud the leadership. Not necessarily that they loved me that much, because I was a tough leader. I was a tough taskmaster, and but my job was not to make everybody in that department friends, but make them effective, and have the type of responsibility that says community first, citizens first. And I have to tell you, on that line, I think every day about how we have lost in our Congress. We elect good people who get to be non-people. They get to be an item for the party, Democratic Party, Republican Party, raising money all the time. And I guess must not be much time for them to respond to local constituency needs, because they vote on party lines. Our needs are not necessarily party needs. It is human needs, human consideration, human elevation in terms of standards of living and understanding. Also, the citizens that I know in the city would like to have a better understanding, and to a point where they would believe in the people that represent us. I get to the point I get terribly frustrated when I see people that can go to Congress, and before you know what happens, they've got $1 million funds, and you wonder where those funds are coming from, what they're about. I'm not putting anybody down for it. I'm just saying that seems to be the trend these days. Everybody's out to raise money for parties. Now, on that line, I will tell you, the most divisive thing that ever happened to this city, in my mind, was when we changed local government officials' elections to partisan elections, judges included. It's unconscionable. It's inconceivable that a judge should have to be a Democrat or Republican in order to render the law. The law should stand for itself, and so should the person passing judgment. And so I think we had enough problem being divided black and white. But then we came and identified a division bipartisan. And for the most part, true moderate, true Democrats, the few whites that were by that time, began to be associated with the black community, and that made up the Democratic Party. And then you had the others, the Republican Party. And we're divided, even in our churches. If you're a Republican or Democrat, it's a different relationship because of all the division in Washington and even now locally, because we get into real scramble. And I never ran as a partisan, as sheriff or mayor. And consequently, I had all of the elections, I had up to 88% of the votes in Memphis and Shelby County. And that was a big black and white and liberal, conservative and what have you. It was about the service and relationship that I had with the people. And now, if you are a Republican or Democrat, you're treated differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think the label Democrat or Republican automatically it polarizes. So let's go to your term with Shelby County Mayor. Talk about from that vantage point. I think, to me, it does go back to relationships, and that has to transcend. But how is there a way we can move away from the labels? Is there a way we can go and create the relationships to where we can transcend this and come together and heal? I mean, give us your perspective putting on the Shelby County Mayor hat.
I'm going to give an example. Lamar Alexander was elected governor, but at the same time I was elected mayor. And we met shortly thereafter because we had a job to do, and that was to get a space for FedEx to expand with the national and getting the use of the National Guard property at the airport. We met, and that issue came up, and we began to work on that and solve the problem. We didn't check to see if it was Republican or Democrat or whatever, but it was an issue, it's an economic issue. It was a growth issue for Memphis and Shelby County. But Lamar made a statement to me as he went about his business of being governor and I was going to be mayor. He said, I'm not going to come to Memphis and tell you guys what to do in Memphis and Shelby County, but I'll tell you, if you can get together and determine what you want to do for the city, I'll do my best to help you achieve your goals. And with that, Ron Terry and a group of businessmen, we came up with what we call the Jobs Conference. The Jobs Conference was designed for input from every community in Memphis, black, white, poor, rich. And this went on for weeks. At the end of the day, it was educating people of what our assets were, the river and those kinds of things. That was one side. The other thing was, what are your concerns in South Memphis and North Memphis and so on and so forth. And those were, they dealt with it, put that on paper. It didn't say Republican and Democrat.
Yeah.
That was the first one of those kinds of events that I had ever seen. But it was incredibly successful. Out of that, though, came that we have to determine what is the best opportunity for us to succeed in Memphis. What is our strategy going to be? I went to a strategy development class in Seattle, Washington, and with that and others and Rhodes College and the business jobs conference people, we determined we needed to promote the river. We needed to promote the fact we have more railroads and a great airport. We should be a distribution center. We need to promote that. Then what about tourism? Well, we have Beale Street. What can we do about Beale Street? It was then this very archaic state, but in there, so we need to look at ways we can improve Beale Street and attract people. We had Elvis Presley. At that time, in 1978, 79, he had died 2 years early, but he had never been recognized as much as he needed to be recognized then, because people all over the world knew who Elvis Presley was, and he was an asset to us. We needed to capitalize on that, and we began to do that. And so doing, we began to attract people into Memphis. Mm-hmm. And so that became an industry that's been very profitable for Memphis, and we need to continue to do just exactly that. That's good money. It don't take a lot of money to sell reputation and music and fun. We didn't have as we used to say, we didn't have the surf and the slopes and the slot machines, but we had Beale Street. We had an opportunity to sell Elvis Presley and blues and all of that. Memphis and May came along a little earlier. Lyman Aldridge and a bunch of guys started Memphis and May. Well, Memphis and May, along with the Jobs Conference and an active Chamber of Commerce and a progressive county mayor who didn't distinguish between city and county, because the city was also in the county, and a lot of people never knew that until I was elected. But I told them, Memphis, you are Shelby Countyans, and you are part of my constituency, and you elected me to be your mayor.
Yeah.
And that was a different set of, so I took on the role of saying, Memphis is the largest city in my county. A lot of people thought that was a hoot, because typically in the past, you thought, well, something way out here somewhere that you don't recognize. But the schools were a big part of Shelby County funding. And medical care, the med, hospitals, care, all that, libraries, that was a part of Shelby County for everybody. But we went together then with the Jobs Conference, and we began to say, we've got to get out of, we must go beyond the boundaries of the river in Tennessee and even the country. And see, we became a part of the Southeast USA Japan Association. We became a part of the Southeast USA Korea Association, along with 7 states in the South. And I took an equal position with all those governors. I assumed the role of being a part of that marketing in Japan and wherever we went. And as of now, we have over 175 Japanese companies in Tennessee. And it didn't happen by accident. We went to sell Tennessee. as a great opportunity to have a business, and it's worked well. The joy that I've had in all of that is working with people like Lamar, who did the forward in this book, and who never, I suspect, got credit for the role that he played, and that's unfortunate. I hope some people will take to heart that all of us are sort of like the turtle sitting on the fence post. He didn't get there by himself.
Right.
And
Somebody got him up there.
Exactly. And we all need to recognize none of us are really unto ourselves all that important, but together, collectively, we're working with other people of like minds. A common goal is more achievable. And what you're doing, Jeremy, is an incredible new frontier that has been forgotten for about 25 years or 30 years because a lot of people have abdicated to the federal bureaucracies, allowing them to come in and just spotting here and there events that they claim we're dealing with this issue and that issue that doesn't get the job done. Until we elevate our own mindset in Memphis, every citizen, we need to get back to becoming engaged with organizations and issues because the door's always open. People might be afraid to volunteer, but hey, if it's going on, knock on the door and tell I want to be involved in it. People have gotten involved with the zoo, the airport, and all these other initiatives, and be a part of the joy of making something happen because it's your town. Make the most of it.
Well, I mean, that's your career right there. I mean, when you look at stepping up and even having the support network, but still stepping up and saying, hey, something needs to be done about Shelby County Sheriff's Office, and next thing you know, that puts in place your whole career trajectory. Give us one fun moment from Elvis. So give us a fun Elvis story.
Okay.
Obviously, you were friends with him, good friends with him. Such good friends that he gave you a car.
He did give me a car, actually. Well, and that was not necessarily a fun thing, but he did. And I was not in office, by the way, when he gave me the car. But he came from Tupelo, East Tupelo, and I came from a distance place nearby. My grandmother, as a matter of fact, lived like 2 blocks from where he grew up. And it's at that time he lived in a 1-bedroom shotgun house, as did everybody else. And as a matter of fact, when I was 16 years old, I met a girl who lived next door to Elvis when he was younger than me, 3 or 4 years younger. And I hitched a ride from Fulton, where I was growing up, to go see that gal. And so I didn't know him at that point. But Elvis said, let's go to Tupelo. I want to see, the sheriff was a friend of mine. I said, I want to go down and meet the sheriff. I'd like to have his badge from him, my Lee County and what have you. So let's take the back roads. So we go the back roads down through Holly Springs and Tacopolo and back through there, little country town. So we had a carload of people, and we stopped off at a little country store. And then you walk in the store, it's a wooden floor, one person in the store. A guy had on overalls and had a fan going, and they had one of these old Coke boxes where you lift, the deal, and take the Coke out, pop it. And we did that. And Elvis typically had on this weird-looking stuff, a lot of people with high collars and fur collars and all that kind of stuff. So we'd go in, and Red West and Lamar Fike and some of the other guys with us, and so it was real quiet. And the old man looking over his glasses and checking us out. It looked like he was thinking about something. So somebody said, "Do you recognize any of these people?" And he said, "Ain't that Bill Morris?" So Elvis told that story forever.
That's hilarious.
But I'm going to have to add the side note to that. We go and we get to where he lived, and I said, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go up and say my grandmother is real critically ill. He said, won't I go with you? I remember her. So he and I go up to my grandmother's house. She's on the hospital bed, with the rail around it and all that kind of stuff. And so we go in, and immediately she said, "Hi, Elvis." You know how old people talk. "Hi, Elvis. How you?" Well, he talked to her, and they had a nice dialogue, and I spoke. Of course, that's my grandmother. That night, and he tells this story, my grandmother's daughter lived there with him, said after Buddy left, he said, my grandmother said, I sure did enjoy seeing Elvis, but who was that man with him? so it works two ways.
I say you had to turn him out. Sometimes you're recognized over Elvis, sometimes not.
See, that guy probably watched local TV down there and 50 miles down that way, but that was hilarious.
Well, give us, as you reflect, especially on the opportunity of the book to really share the stories, paint the pictures. But when you look at, your legacy here in Shelby County in the Mid-South and in your career, give us, just what kind of puts a smile on your face when you step back and you have a chance to look over it. Give us one thing that really makes you happy.
What makes me happy is that my family, I have 3 sons, I have 4 children, 9 grandchildren, 11 great-grandchildren, pictures in the back. And I go by the line, I said, you can live a rich life without riches. If I worked on St. Jude, you can put that in your hip pocket and that's in the bank. You work with the University of Memphis and all the projects out there, the University of Sports and raising money. And I was part of starting the ambassador organization, raised lots of money for St. Jude over the years. As a matter of fact, I was ticket sales chairman for the very first event that we had in Memphis with Danny Thomas, and I was president of JC's. So I've been involved, still on the advisory board. That was when I was 28, and that's been a long time ago. And so it'll soon be 60 years. I traveled with Danny. I went to his funeral. I helped seat the presidents at his funeral. That was a dynamic thing. I'm sitting in the office with on a committee in the White House appointed by Ronald Reagan, and him sitting across from me, and I'm sitting there thinking, how in the devil did this kid from Fulton, Mississippi, coming from that environment, somehow or the other, somebody pushed him along. And I'm sitting here with the man I have the greatest respect for of any man on earth that I know, and that's Ronald Reagan. And and I have a picture in this book of him being in that committee. Those kinds of things, along with the fact that my family has, I think, enjoyed the fact that we have been accepted in Memphis, non-Memphian. The door's open, and I would challenge and say this to anybody who would be willing to listen to me today. You can be as much a part of Memphis as anybody who call themselves Memphian. You're a Memphian the day you sit inside the city and you say, I want to live here, I want to be part of this, I want to be at school here, I want to be a part of the solution to the problem. All of that comes with the constitutional liability. The humanity that we have around us is a direct result of what we're willing to do to make it.
Amen to that. I agree 100%. I mean, I think, I've said this over and over till I'm blue in the face too, is there's no greater city. If you want to make a difference, you can make a difference here. The connectivity, the ability to create change, and to see it firsthand, to see your impact becomes contagious. And I mean, I agree 100% is you come here with an open heart and open arms, and this city will open up to you. Talk about, on your end to that regard, because I think it is one of those where you yourself are a great example of someone who you don't have to come from means to create opportunities. Speak a little bit on that regard of just, what it took for you, sacrifice, your mindset to overcome that, to be able to create these opportunities. But it wasn't about monetary gain. It was about creating opportunities for other. And you said it all throughout the interview it was others helping you and you helping others that created opportunities that weren't about the money, but were about the impact.
Totally about impact. Self-reliance, building, and being rid of that terrible thing called inferiority complex. Never got rid of it totally, but I worked on it, still work on it every day. And when I evaluate what has happened in my life, the best decision I ever made was I'd rather be involved in making things better than making a product and selling it for product. I've worked in business. I'm successful in business. I had a real estate company, consulting business. I love business, but I made enough money to convince me that my time was more valuable. And like, for example, Boy Scouts of America. I was the only guy who was ever elected President's Council here 3 times. Head of the Kentucky, Tennessee Boy Scouts of America on the regional board. Head of the National Cub Scouting Committee, and the Relations Committee with Senator Lugar, people like that. So that's it. I mean, that's awesome. And I'm a Silver Beaver, Silver Antelope, won all the awards, as I did in every organization I ever attended. I was recognized, and that was enriching. It was really, and it even goes on to challenge you to do more in those areas of common need.
So what do you like to do to relax?
I like to play golf. I like to read. I just got back from a cruise and I had 3 books that had been on my shelf for a while. I read all 3. And I have a new goal. I'm going to try to read 1 book a week and pass it on for at least a year. I have large numbers of books. Lamar, did you ever hear of Lamar? But I have some James Patterson, those kind of books, and then I've always read self-help books. And I've always read people who write books about a book of the Bible or their interpretation and what have you. But I have a farm place and out the country. We have fish and hunt, and I've had it for 50 years. And have a place there for every one of my children to have a house, a cottage on about 500 acres out near Chickasaw State Park. But it's a part of what happened to me when I was a kid. We didn't have a home. We only stayed in one house long enough for the rent to come due and maybe make it one more payment. And we'd go on to the next shack 15, 16 times in my early youth. So I said, when I bought this place 50 years ago, I'm going to have it so that I have enough room. Anyone I love and any of my family, if they ever get to where they can't make it, there's a place for them, and they can come there and they will have a place to go. Be comfortable, not be out on the cold world. And it's been that way, and I still have it that way. And all my kids and all of my grandkids and everybody knows this is our place, and it's there for the use. Everyone in my family. So
what do you hope your legacy is when you look at how others think of you, especially with your time in the public office? What do you hope that your legacy is?
I hope my legacy is simply this: he tried to make the world better, and hold no bad thoughts about the mistakes I made. No, I did what I did in total best interest, knowing that I'm human, and I love my family and I love my church. In the middle of all of that, there's still room for making errors.
The book again is Bill Morris, A Legendary Life. It's available. You can get it on Amazon.com. Here locally in the Memphis area, you've got Novel Bookstore. I know that you're doing a lot of speaking now, and you're out promoting the book, obviously, but we definitely encourage everyone to pick up a copy of the book. And where else should we go? Is there anywhere else people need to go to stay in touch with you to get the book?
Well, the book is available on BillMorrisBook.com, written for enjoyment, but to create perspectives of what's happened in the last 60 years in Memphis, how we got here, and what our needs, how our needs might be met today if we follow some of the same rules back then, which you're trying to advocate in a very wonderful way.
Ladies and gentlemen, he is a change maker. Bill Morris, once again, the book is Bill Morris, A Legendary Life, BillMorrisBook.com, Amazon.com, here locally, Novel Bookstore. So definitely make sure and get your copy. But Bill Morris, thank you for all you do, all you've done, all you continue to do, for being a change maker. Greatly appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you for listening to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current and brought to you by Lipscomb and Pitts Insurance and DataFacts. To learn more about our guests and to share your stories of others leading by example, visit us online at citycurrent.com and follow us on social media using @CityCurrent. Please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen. Now, think big, start small, and act now. Be a change maker.